This is a Pasco Media production. Please visit pascomedia.com.
In Latin, Renovo means to renew, restore, or revive. This is the show where we explore the miraculous nature of the mundane as we look at one part of the Catholic tradition to help you engage more fully in the practice of faith. Past episodes are available at renovopodcast.com. I'm Doug Tuke, and this is a fun show. We're going to talk about the cult of St. Christopher. Some of you might actually have a St. Christopher medal on your car, and you've been driving like a bat out of hell for a long time. But here's the thing. We're going to kind of unpack where this guy comes from. There are a lot of popular saints, and a lot of them are really well loved, but not very many of them have been kind of ousted from the church calendar like St. Christopher has. So if you have no idea who this guy is, this is a great show for you because you're going to be like, what? And if you're like a St. Christopher lover, this could be a sad show for you because there's a lot of truth, but there's also a lot of fiction that goes with who this guy is. Okay, so he was ousted 40 years ago from the actual calendar, but can still be celebrated as a saint. So his image can be found inside of cars, on the walls of churches, and on the necks of safety-seeking travelers, okay? His most prevalent image, he looks like he's a really tall guy, formidable man who walks across the unruly river, wooden staff firmly in his hand. His face is kind of strained, looking upward to the child resting on his oversized shoulders. St. Christopher he's actually referenced in literature as Christofre, and on his breast of silver, the silver chain. Chaucer actually wrote about him in the Canterbury Tales. And then in the movie, the 2005 film Crash, which it's like a habitual car thief uses his trusty St. Christopher medal as a good luck charm. This kind of promulgates all the modern popularity that's going with it. He's the patron saint of travelers, protector against toothaches, hailstorms, sudden death, one of the most endearing for all Catholics. His life, his story, kind of border on like legend and legitimacy, and it's really complex. It's a faith-affirming exercise in service, grace, and love, but it's also really difficult. I mean, Christopher has proven total resilience over time. He's grown in popularity over the centuries, but suspicious, historians have really kind of questioned his validity, and that's what this show is going to be about. We're kind of going to dig into that. So here's what we know. He's known as the Wounded Wanderer. He was a guy of a lot of different names. So his name, as known in most ancient history, was Ophirus. That was one of the more famous ones, Ophferus. Born in the 3rd century in Asia Minor, son of a king. He grew to be kind of a restless young guy, a big guy. And the early years of his life were spent basically in search of riches, like most young men born of royalty. He had a lot of purpose. And kind of just worthy allegiance to the king. Okay, and as the story goes, this young Ophirus, looking for the strongest and boldest ruler to follow, briefly courted Satan, thinking evil was more powerful. How crazy is that? So when his new master, Satan, cowered in fear at a holy cross on the side of the road, Ophirus, the legend says, abandoned evil, abandoned Satan, choosing light over darkness. And during this period of transition, some holy hermit kind of awakened the restless wanderer, Ophirus, to Christianity, schooling him, baptizing him. And then from then on, Ophirus pledged his life to Christ and then vowed to serve God's people along the banks of this kind of untamed river. So he built a hut and he set up camp with a whole new purpose. He's going to be the boatman to the world. He's going to help people. He's going to carry people through chaos, as the story goes. His popularity becomes really solidified when this small child approaches him and he wants safe passage across the river. So he hosts the boy up on his shoulders, and then with his trusty staff kind of begins this journey across the river. And as the river deepened, the child begins to grow heavier and heavier, and the water quickly rises. The precious cargo continues to kind of weigh the giant down. And then, according to historians, as he reaches the banks of the river, Ophirus said, "Child, thou hast put me in great peril. Thou weighest almost as if I had all the world upon me, I might bear no greater burden. And then the child says, Christopher, thou hast not only borne all the world upon thee, but thou hast borne him that created and made all the world upon thy shoulders. And then the child instructs Christopher, the name means Christ bearer, surprise, surprise, to cross the river again and plant his staff in the ground, telling the ferryman that life would come forth from this staff. So to Christopher's astonishment, by morning, his staff had actually taken root into the ground, and bright flowers and a bunch of fruit grew from it. That's kind of amazing. This is the legend. This is the story. So the rest of Christopher's life is way sketchier in detail, okay? One legend states that many in the immediate area kind of converted to Christianity right away based on this encounter, based on the story that was born out of this encounter, which drew a lot of unwanted attention. So in Lycia, present-day Turkey, under Emperor Decius, he was imprisoned, shot with arrows, burned, and then beheaded around 251 AD. That was the end of Christopher. Remember, it's still illegal to be Christian at that time. So the life of this guy, the martyr, Christopher, it's really questioned by historians for obvious reasons. The St. Christopher story, it's proven itself kind of invulnerable over the years, though. I mean, as much as we've poked at it, it's amazing that we really cherish who this guy is. So did he really exist or not? All right. So Dr. Lawrence Cunningham, author of and author John A. O'Brien, professor of theology at the University of Notre Dame, they believe that his life indeed is rooted in the truth. And then these guys say it's not clear, but there probably was a martyr during the period of Decius with whom all kinds of stories got identified. So Cunningham says, and one of the ones that lasted was that he was a person who took people across a river and was given a name that means one who bears Christ. Okay, so that there's probably truth to that legend. So St. Christopher's popularity, like the giant staff, bears a lot of fruit, literally. According to Francis Mersham in the Catholic Encyclopedia, Volume 3, a brotherhood that guided travelers over a massive alpine pass in Tyrol and Vorarlberg was founded in 1386 under the patronage of St. Christopher. And in the early 16th century, a St. Christopher Temperance Society was active in European areas such as Carinthia, Saxony, Styria, Munich. A picture of St. Christopher was found in a monastery on Mount Sinai, dating from the time of Justinian. That's about 526 to 565. His image was cast on coins in Württemberg and Bohemia. His statues could be found on bridges, imparting safety to travelers over rivers and whatnot. Christopher's wood carvings and paintings were hung on walls of a lot of European churches, often accompanied with the inscription, quote, whoever shall behold the image of St. Christopher shall not faint or fall on that day. So he's always had this patronage of safety attached with him. And further proof of his popularity, St. Christopher was included as someone invoked against an assortment of hardships, okay? He was chosen as the patron of Baden, Brunswick, Mecklenburg, and that popularity, it really never wavered, okay? Even recently, organizations like, they're called the Christophers, founded by Father John Keller in 1945, they're named after him. The Christophers, their whole purpose is to encourage all individuals to celebrate, quote, their abilities and use them to raise the standards in all phases of human endeavor. And it's kind of fitting for who Christopher was. So despite the long-lasting influence, you got to remember a lot of aspects of his life are just, they're shrouded in myth and legend, okay? But this scholar, Cunningham, he believes his popularity, regardless of uncertainty and just certain things, he believes that it's unmistakable. He says, I think what happened was that St. Christopher entered into the popular culture. He became an icon well beyond whatever historical veracity we have relative to his name. Bold sentence, bold line. All right, so there is, however, a bit of an identity crisis. Okay, so popularity, admiration aside, okay, the legitimacy has always really challenged him. In the 16th century, Desiderius Erasmus, a Dutch humanist and a writer, argues against him in his book, The Praise of Folly. Erasmus, who Cunningham says, Cunningham criticizes him and says he has an acidic pen. He believed that the cult of St. Christopher was just simply a retelling of the Hercules legend because of his great size. You know, the beleaguered giant met with further hard times in 1969 when the Vatican, under Pope Paul VI, took the Roman calendar and did some spring cleaning, as they say. And a lot of holy names, including Christopher, were actually booted from the general lineup because their legitimacy actually couldn't be confirmed. But Cunningham believes it had a lot more to do with maintaining organization than denouncing Christopher's life. He says this was an attempt to get the cycle of saints into some kind of rational order, Cunningham says. So what they did was go towards those whose historicity was shaky. So St. Christopher was kind of downgraded actually on his feast day, since he shares July 5th with St. James the Greater, who was an apostle. And though his life, Christopher's life, is questioned and the legacy is kind of demoted, you got to understand, friends, loyalty to Christopher is by no means like a dereliction of church law, okay? The church typically doesn't discourage any form of devotion that's not clearly heretical, okay? Cunningham even says this. He says, still maintain, not so much in American churches, but in European churches, all kinds of relics, even though their authenticity is, to put it mildly, kind of dubious, he says. St. Christopher statues and influence are still very formidable, and his image is on prayer cards and medals. Masses are said in his honor still today, and parishes around the world still bear his name. So listen, okay, regardless of whether St. Christopher existed or not, here's the thing. For a lot of people, okay, his grace, his talent for keeping worried travelers at peace, it's beyond dispute, especially with modern writing. Okay, a month after 9/11, I was reading this blog, and the author says, a month after 9/11, I flew to across the country to do an interview for a story, and being no fan of travel, I was nervous and really hesitant, to say the least, and I slept poorly for days before the trip, and I imagined our airplane was plummeting to the death, and like the legend, it felt as if the weight of the world rested on my mind and my shoulders. And this blog writer, pretty famous blog writer, just kind of says, I asked St. Christopher to pray for me, and I was given peace. St. Christopher reminds us that in our own way, we carry Christ on our shoulders and in our hearts, no matter what. Okay. Here's what I want to do on the show, though. Here's for all of us that are in ministry. I love stuff like this. Here's some like major themes that come from the legend of St. Christopher. Okay. He can do more than give drivers peace of mind, okay, on the interstate, right? Those medals on our dashboards. The great ferryman, this giant, he guided, the weary, all of us, across a wild river. And his virtues are really a guide for us today. So here's some virtues that St. Christopher really embodies and teaches us today. Redemption, okay? Like many of us in our youth, St. Christopher sought riches, notoriety, and just the flair of secular life. And it took a hermit with a zest for God to turn this stubborn guy into a pauper, lacking in wealth and rich in faith. He's a symbol of redemption. He's a symbol of courage. St. Christopher battled undercurrents, the devil, who could offer no salvation. He battled an oppressive society that punished people for their faith, a crazy, hazardous river that only a giant could cross. And he was so brave in the face of adversity that even the weight of the world on his shoulders could not overburden his courage. I love that. Service, with very little talent for preaching and fasting. I mean, he wasn't a notorious guy for that. St. Christopher fell back on his gifts, his signature gifts, to serve others. Also, he was who he was. He was big. He used his size to serve the Lord. I love that. You do what you do. You do you. A simple guy with a pure heart. He pledges to carry people through danger. Terms kind of a menial task. The idea of being a ferryman into like this noble deed. I love that. I love the imagery that comes with that. That's kind of awesome. One of his virtues is sacrifice. When St. Christopher was imprisoned and killed for his beliefs, like all martyrs, he proved the sincerity of his convictions by dying for them, literally. His faith, his deep love for God, dwarf his very size. I mean, his notion of sacredness, making sacred simple things, his sacrifice, awesome for us to remember. And resilience. Here's the thing. Young people can be a handful. I've got kids. Don't kid yourself. Christopher felt firsthand, kind of a little boy, a peculiar little boy. It really nearly caused him to sink. I mean, that's the bottom line. He was great. He was afraid, but he was faith-filled. And this guy, St. Christopher, the ferryman, he shows a lot of resilience in the task and strength in body, proving that death can do little to drown just an awesome, buoyant spirit. I love that. I love that. I love the idea of that. So, here's the thing. Just kind of regardless of what conclusions you draw from mythology versus reality when it comes to St. Christopher, here's the thing you got to remember. There's not a single one of us, believers, not a single one of us that could do with less understanding of redemption, courage, service, sacrifice, and resilience. We all need more of that in our lives daily. Not a single one of us. And you gotta place yourself in the story. This is very Ignatian. You gotta place yourself in the notion of this mythology. This is not a retelling of Hercules. We have to understand, here's a man who deeply seeks great power and truth and tends towards evil. Okay, St. Augustine, there you go, right? I mean, this is another St. Augustine, a little bit more blue collar though, right? So he allies himself with what he thinks is the dominating power of culture, which is Satan. Okay, whoa, okay? Talk about an about face. He's easily duped by the calling or the draw to the power of evil, but then notices that the great victorious king, Christ, okay, has conquered evil. In other words, he's so deeply invested in Satan that he even sees Satan cower before the cross. Clearly, there's something more powerful. I'm pretty sure that's a good lesson for us today. Okay, and then being a big dude and being a guy who kind of comes from wealth but understands that, he seeks that power. He seeks the power of God, the power of goodness, okay? And that power makes him a pauper, makes him poor and humble. Just by the deeper he seeks his relationship with Christ, the more his size, his desire for power, he realizes in his humility, in his weakness, in service is the greatest of strength, and says, okay, this wild, crazy river, I'm big, I can help people, I can carry people across this place. And then in the midst of that service, the greatest weight, the weight of the world comes to him. God only gives us what we can handle, right? You've heard that 1,000 times. And then this image, this beautiful child that is the creator of the universe, really a symbol of Christ, comes to rest solely on him. And even though it's tough, and I love this, it's a strenuous journey. It's a strenuous journey. Christ says, from your hardship, there will be fruit. You know what? Here's the thing. I don't care if that's mythology. I don't care if that's legend. That's great story. That's great spiritual story. It's the incarnation in all of our lives. It's like this deep-seated relationship with humanity that's illustrated through this man, mythological or not, legend or not. That is our encounter. What we seek of power, what real power is, and what great exercise of that authority actually is our smallness, our humility. And the deeper we try to retrieve that, Christ says you can handle any weight of the world and survive. And great fruit will come from your dedication. Holy smokes. Okay, that's St. Christopher. That's St. Christopher. And if we ask him to pray for us, the church has no problem with that. No problem with that. Wow. Now you know. Slap those medals on your dashboard. Ask him to bless your travels, and especially if there's anxiety or any kind of anxiousness before entering into travel. Say, St. Christopher, pray for me. Pray for me. All right? That's an important thing. Wow, what a gift to the church. Way to go, Catholics. Don't forget to visit RenovoPodcast.com for past episodes. Please subscribe to, review, and rate our podcast. We always appreciate your input. Your topic suggestions, questions, and or comments are always welcome at Doug@RenovoPodcast.com. Learn more about me on Twitter and Instagram at DTOOKE and the number 1. Friends, always remember to engage the tradition and live the conversion. Until next time, God bless.